Hello, and welcome to this very special episode of Blockchain Bylines. My name is Nicholas Carey, co-founder and vice chairman of Blockchain.com. Today, we're here to talk about a very special partnership between Blockchain.com and TonX, the Ton strategy company. And I'm joined by none other than Manuel Stotz, the executive chairman of this new venture. Thank you for joining us. I've been looking forward to this for a while. How did you first learn about crypto? And then how did you get to the point of having such a ton of conviction about Ton?
Right. And of course, it all started with Bitcoin. Like most people in my profession, what we call now traditional finance. When I heard first about Bitcoin, it was probably in the mid 2010s. I've got a younger business partner who's bought his first Bitcoin in 2012 and runs a full node and used to run a home miner, and he sort of tried to get my attention to this. But I was I was at Goldman Sachs, but not anywhere at Goldman. I was in SEAL Team 6, and it was magic internet money. Come on,
that's never going to work.
It's a Ponzi scheme, right? And I think this is actually important to reflect on, right? The natural, humans are very judgmental creatures. We have to be, right? Is it, safe? Is it dangerous? Is it good? Is it bad, right? And we are quick to judge. And, it's very normal to judge Bitcoin the way I did. And I think that's natural. But, when you then revisit it again and again and again, it hasn't sort of died. It hasn't gone away. It's only gotten bigger and more adopted. And then you start taking it seriously. Then you actually look to understand it. You have to have the humility. Yeah. To basically admit to yourself that you were wrong judging it the first time around. And humility, I think, is in short supply in general in the, sort of rainmaker financial, traditional finance business and so forth. And I think that's an important, insight and reflection. And so basically I took it seriously really in 2019, 2020, dove out, and of course a few other things happened, right? For the first time, of course I lived through the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, but for the first time in 2020 when, the COVID response basically let the money printer to go burr, I kind of was worried about, what I was very familiar with, emerging market currencies.
Yeah, you're what happens if everything I own gets devalued,
right?
Because there's a lot more dollars flushing in the system.
And I kind of, read the Bitcoin Standard, and that was definitely an eye-opening moment. I went to Bet with Bitcoin podcast for I still do that today, frankly. And then it was, sort of first gradually, then suddenly, right? As Parker Lewis said. And of course, we are big in the Bitcoin space. My first love, huge believers. I think this is, the biggest, the one it started with and so forth. But also, I think appreciated the, sort of design space and in the, what we call altcoins, I guess. And I'm skeptical. I think there's 99% of those sadly will never have sufficient use cases, utility, or adoption. But that's fine, and there's a handful of them which I think are very interesting, and clearly Ton for many reasons was the most interesting of those. Of course, you have to give it to Vitalik Buterin and Ethereum. They've kind of pioneered all this smart contract, multi-purpose blockchain work, and of course Ethereum is $500 billion asset and is a candidate to go to $1 trillion, right? But at that point Ethereum is $1 trillion is a 2x from here, right? And I also take my hat for, Anatoly at Solana, the work they've done, especially how they persevered in the sort of demise of FTX, which really was a huge, sponsor of Solana, and thrived in coming out of it, right? And that's a $100 billion asset or so today. And that's, again, if it goes to $1 trillion, it would be a 10x. But, I think actually bringing my sort of traditional tech experience, and keep in mind, I've lived through the, sort of Mac 7, as we call them now, the FANGs of yesterday. And look, I can't tell you whether it's 5 or 7, right? But I can tell you there's, from my judgment, a handful of, protocols which are, candidates at least for becoming $1 trillion protocols.
The
right?
best ones: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Ton.
Bitcoin is already there, and it's a $2 trillion. And I think Bitcoin is in a different category for me. Bitcoin might end up being the denominator, and I can riff on that later. But clearly Ethereum, $500 billion, Solana, $100 billion, and I do believe Ton is in that group, right? And the obvious reason for me, because it's in that group, is that we have an exclusive partnership with Telegram as Toncoin, right?
This is one of the most important things, I think, for our listeners to understand, is that crypto over the past 15 years has been through these sort of catapulting moments. Bitcoin sort of establishes this alternative asset class. Ethereum sort of expands the mind space around what we can do with smart contracts on the internet. I think Solana inspires a retail sort of wave of adoption. But all of them, those first three, while having important product market fits for different reasons, all of them have a huge problem, which is distribution. So TON has maybe the most unfair advantage in this department.
Absolutely, and this is of course also misunderstood. And people have heard of Telegram. Just to quickly riff on Telegram, it's 1 billion monthly active users and growing. It is already the largest sort of messenger app, I think, in the crypto space, but the second largest in the world after WhatsApp. WhatsApp is no longer growing. It is also the number 6 app in the world. And it is the largest one that actually has native crypto integration. Yep. So let's go through the other 5 quickly and ask the question, which of them are doing blockchain or crypto, right? You've got, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, not for lack of trying, so far not been able to integrate blockchain. And you've got the 2 Chinese giants, Tencent, WeChat, ByteDance, TikTok. They have also not been able to integrate blockchain. And then you got number 6, Telegram, but it is the largest, excluding the other 5, that has done it. It's live, it's deployed. As you know, if you give me a Telegram handle and I happen to have it, I can send you Toncoin or dollars, stablecoins that live on the Ton blockchain, or any other asset that lives on the Ton blockchain, by pressing a button at the speed of light for a fraction of a nickel. And I think that's just something really to reflect on. I think the most compelling investment thesis I've come across are simple and compelling and unique and differentiated, and the insight on the distribution is should not be discarded. Like, this is the main, I think, key to understand here, and to keep it simple. The entire blockchain industry has a chicken and egg problem, right? I mean, why would anyone use Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, or Toncoin if no one else uses it, right? So you have to have these diehard, core communities and adoption waves, and you've been through this, and I take my hat from the early days of 2012 and onwards, how this must have been. But you have a giant, so you have a chicken and egg problem, right? And we happen to have a chicken called Telegram. Now, it must be easier to lay the egg and get Toncoin into the hands of millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, ultimately billions of people. And this is sort of not new. I mean, the most famous line that Bill Gates made in the late 90s when the internet came first about was sort of content is king, right? And who am I to disagree with Bill Gates in the late 90s? I also believe that content is king, but distribution is the queen. And she's wearing the pants. I know that's true in both of our households. And so the key is you want both the content and the distribution. And then I would finish with the age of AI. Just one observation there, that the content might be more at risk of being commoditized than the distribution. So distribution is the queen.
You've got this great conviction about TON as a digital asset. I know that you served as the president of the TON Foundation, which is the independent body that helps develop the core protocol and support ecosystem development. You have now launched the first digital asset treasury company for Toncoin. It's called Ton Strategy Co. Why did you do this? What's the advantage? Walk us through this business.
Yeah. No, indeed, this is a big, development and a big step we took this summer, really. This is brand new, barely a month old. So at the Ton Foundation, I've learned a lot. Think about the Ton Foundation as an independent nonprofit that basically furthers the development, the growth of the ecosystem, giving grants and so. But also it's a little bit similar, to the government in a way, like not in a bad way. I mean, it's just it's a nonprofit,
like an academic institution.
Yeah, exactly. and I think having a private sector listed company is going to be extremely important for every digital asset ecosystem. The most obvious, sort of example is maybe what happened in Bitcoin over the last 5 years. Michael Saylor, right, 5 years ago adopted a Bitcoin standard with his publicly listed company, Strategy Co., formerly MicroStrategy. Ticker is MSTR. And, we have got 5 years of data through one bear market, which was quite vicious. The stock has outperformed NVIDIA in the AI boom. And Bitcoin's up 10x in the last 5 years, roughly speaking. His stock is around 30x. And that's despite a, barely existing operating business. So what happened, right? What happened was that basically, while only arguably 10x of the, a third of the return, 10x out of 30, came from the underlying. It's very, very important that the underlying performs, by the way. Like, if you're not convinced on the long-term positive future about the underlying, don't go anywhere near any of these trashy companies, right? But 2/3, so the vast majority of the returns have come from what I would call intelligent capital allocation. And actually very similar to TradFi if people want to get deeper into this. And basically, what he's realized is, remember when we talked about the institutions are coming. Well, institutions are here. Right? I mean, MicroStrategy is over $100 billion market cap company.
Yeah, it's huge.
We have an ETF launched in Bitcoin that dwarfed everything we've ever seen since the inception of ETFs, right? And I think he realized that number one, there's 100 times or so more capital that can buy equities that compared to be able to buy coins, right? And that seems to be even true for Bitcoin today, which of course is surprising, right? And that's also why his stock and other digital asset treasury companies have at least for large periods of time traded at a premium to their book value, which we can debate. But secondly, he's realized that this is a permanent capital vehicle. And Warren Buffett in the 60s realized permanent capital is the holy grail for long-term compounding, right? And what it means is it's not an ETF.
Such an important thing to understand here. Yeah.
Correct. If you sell the ETF sells the coins. Now, if you sell MicroStrategy stock or TonX, our stock, the stock can go down, but the coin doesn't move. And you've got permanent capital. And what this means is you can trade at a discount or at a premium to book, but you can do something about that. You can issue stock at a premium, buy back stock at a discount, and you can also stake in our case, which is a huge advantage actually over the Bitcoin companies. Of course, not unique to Ton, exists in Ethereum and Solana and so forth. And you can be included in the index. And the ETF can do none of these things. Can't trade at a premium discount, can't issue a buyback, can't stake, and can't be in an index. And so that's really key to understand. And then the last thing I'll say is that what Saylor realized is that in my, and I agree with him, that this is a bit of a race. This is sort of a winner takes most market. Now, of course, in Bitcoin, there's now hundreds, if not, thousands in the making of so-called Bitcoin treasury companies. But, Saylor is 30 times bigger than the next one or so. And there's massive scale economies in raising capital, especially on the cost of the capital. And so if you can be the winner in an ecosystem, or of course you can be one of the winners in the larger ecosystem, like in Bitcoin, that's really interesting to me, right? Now, I would caution that there's a dynamic at play that I would call what the wise man does at the beginning, the fool does at the end. I think the market already is very discerning about what are the well-conceived, thoughtful, and strong management teams in the space in the treasury company landscape. These are listed stocks, and which ones are not, right? And I think there will also, it needs to be said, there will be potentially an extinction event of the tail. But yeah, it's exciting because I think the stock has basically, and I can explain what we did. And of course, thanks for joining the board and being part of it. But, we basically, found a NASDAQ-listed company at sort of sub $20 million market cap range that importantly had all the filings on time. And then we basically invested just shy of $560 million in what is called a common equity PIPE. PIPE means a private investment in a public company. And basically put most of that money into Toncoin. And then since then, we've filed for $1 billion ATM, which means we can raise primary capital in the stock market by basically pressing a button. And we would only do that if the stock is at or above ideally book value, like a healthy premium, and that gross book value per share. It's not dilution in the conventional sense because we can use that capital to buy more Toncoin at book, and we issue capital at a premium to book. And if the stock trades at a discount to book, we can buy back our stock. And so we can use intelligent capital allocation to drive shareholder value. And I think that's, really hugely exciting because, I come from the equity world and I, of course, have a, deep love affair with digital assets. And now I can combine both.
Yeah, digital assets, capital markets, a long-term time horizon, and then some unfair advantages all coming in together at the same time. I think your description of some of those structural financial capabilities of this firm are so important for investors to understand. So not only have we achieved all of this on a very short time horizon, have that first mover advantage, but TonX, which is the ticker for Ton Strategy Co., is now by far one of the largest holders of Ton coin in the world. What's your ambition? How big of an allocation do you think you can get to? And maybe give us sort of an optimistic time horizon for what growth could look like.
Sure. Yeah, just on the speed, this needs to be said, right? I mean, this was an idea in July, and we were a $1 billion market cap company listed on the NASDAQ by early August, right?
It's an incredible story.
God bless American capitalism and capital markets.
It's such a good one.
It's a balance sheet company, right? It's not like we created a unicorn within a month, but it must be some sort of like...
It's got to be close to being a record.
Guinness Book World Record, right? and this is, of course, an exciting opportunity for all the listeners who are, excited about crypto, want to get more involved in just like passively investing. There's really a lot to do, a lot to build, and if the stars align, I think it will surprise people, the value creation potential.
So you've entered the market in the U.S. I think this is a good point to make around TON itself, which has had sort of this emerging market sort of origin story, but is now marching into America. And this is probably one of the most important things for people to understand, is that a lot of American retail investors don't know about TON yet, or haven't actually had exposure to it. It has only recently been listed on Robinhood, which is very exciting. And there's more venues, sort of exploring adopting Telegram's token TON. So give us sort of a view on why this vehicle sort of gives us already an advantage in not just buying TON from some exchange.
Absolutely. I mean, TON is special for many reasons. The first one I mentioned, which is Telegram. I can't say that often enough. But the second one is that it's the only large layer 1 blockchain that is not yet fully available in the United States. And of course, the US is by far the world's largest, most efficient and deepest capital market. I think roughly half of all global equities are U.S. equities, and that's especially the U.S. is only 5% of global population, but it's 50% of all equity market cap, right? So that's the big daddy. And the reason TON wasn't available in the U.S. until quite recently was basically a self-imposed regulation or restriction that the TON Foundation set under Biden-Harris, where the rules weren't very clear. It is better to avoid the U.S. and see how that plays out. And of course, under the new administration, which is unequivocally pro-crypto, that's changing now. And that's so it's so early. I mean, it's early in general for the entire space, but it's so early for TON, which as a result is now going to have a huge catalyst in my mind, entering the U.S. for the very first time. And of course also its size. I mean, TON is still 50 times smaller than Ethereum and something like 10, 11 times smaller than Solana, right? And it's coming to the US. So what does that mean? So it means is, Telegram in the US has 87 million monthly active users as last reporting. And Telegram has a wallet inside the app that only went live in the US basically in July. So this is like this summer, right? And most even people who are deep in crypto in the US haven't heard of that wallet yet, or haven't heard of TON. But as you know, global sort of crypto communities run on Telegram effectively. And
for our listeners that don't know, if you've ever been to a digital currency or cryptocurrency meetup or conference, they don't use LinkedIn. They aren't sharing phone numbers. They're sharing Telegram handles. And so all of the earliest adopters and the community builders, the founders, the CEOs, the investors that are involved in digital assets use Telegram because that is a global internet capital markets community, and they're all sharing their Telegram handles.
Absolutely, and so that's the wallet launch clearly is one key pillar, but not the only one. TON, like other large tokens, of course, ought to be listed on the largest and most important spot exchanges in the US, and that's not the case yet. Of course, we've been listed on blockchain.com for a while. The early bird catches the worm, and we're super excited about this partnership. We are not yet listed on the largest spot exchange in the US, which is called Coinbase, right? Yeah. Robinhood indeed listed us in a very quiet week, the last week of August. I don't think people have actually noticed yet. And by the time of this recording, I expect another large crypto exchange having listed TON. And of course, a couple smaller ones. And there's also gaps in Asia. We're not big in Japan yet. That's kind of coming. We're not listed yet on the largest spot exchange in South Korea, which is called Upbit and bigger than Coinbase. I expect that also to be rectified in due course. But it's the point I want to make. It's special for many reasons. It's super early, and the best is yet to come.
Yeah, and I think there's the right man at the helm of this whole mission, which is you running around the world, sharing the gospel, but talking about the kind of optimistic perspective on how Telegram can get integrated with Ton globally and having internet scale capital markets basically, forged out of this new moment in time where we finally have regulatory clarity in the United States. There's a global competition, and there are more people adopting these digital assets every single day. So you've obviously come in at the sort of opportune moment. I guess I would ask, tell us a little bit about the leadership team and how you guys are, going to go to work over the next few months.
My role is the executive chairman. That's the same role that Michael Saylor has in MicroStrategy, or if you look at Ethereum, perhaps the best executed Ethereum treasury company is a company called Bitmine, BMNR, run by executive chairman Tom Lee. We got a lot of admiration for that team, and our sort of imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, are copying some of their best ideas there as well, while of course implementing our own. And then we have an executive leadership team. We got a wonderful CEO and CFO, two very successful and strong execs. Veronica is not only an old friend, but was very active in the Ton Foundation before. So I've worked with her there, and she knows the ecosystem very well. And Sarah, of course, you kindly introduced, was a very long-standing and seasoned crypto exec, and also early employee at Gemini. I think nearly a decade of experience in crypto, and a very, very safe pair of hands, which is needed for, I think, a CFO role in that capacity in a public company. And I think there we are, of course, we're hiring. So if anyone is excited about, being part of this, if you ask to join a rocket ship, don't ask which seat, just get on.
Get on board.
And I think my vision here is to have a very, small, effective, strong, world-class leadership team. Of course, supported by a number of sort of helping hands, and I think we want to have flawless compliance. That comes first. I mean, this is a regulated space, so nothing I'm saying constitutes MNPI. There's a regulation called Reg FD, fair disclosure. So we need to make sure all investor communication are reaching investors at the same time. We have a pretty healthy investor relations effort, and that's going to grow. So we have a website. We have released a number of official press releases and a chairman's message. So you can look up our website. You can put in the show notes and check all that out. If history is any guide, I would think the stock should be able to outperform the underlying in a constructive, sort of positive. I don't even use the word bull market, but that would be logical to me. Of course, can't make any promises, but it should also potentially underperform in a bear market, and I think that's it's certainly going to be more volatile. It would be my guess. I mean, that would be the expectation.
Yeah. I think what we're witnessing is the digitization of financial services. It's going to have, shifts between its gears as it accelerates into the next decade. I think it's important for people to have a long-term time horizon to understand, what's really at stake here. But you brought it up so elegantly at the beginning, which is that there are billions of people in the world today that do not yet have good access to financial services, and a lot of these technologies and capabilities are really about putting those features right in the pockets on their smartphones. And so Telegram has a lot of advantages in this department, and I think is doing some extremely important work there. So any final thoughts for our listeners today? Just some things they should think about as they finish their commutes on their way to work today?
Well, I would first encourage everyone to be the user. Take out your smartphone, download Telegram if you don't already have it. If you do have it, check out the wallet feature. And you can buy Toncoin by literally pressing 2 or 3 clicks. You could maybe do it on your credit card. There's a lot of course, other ways to do it. You can buy Toncoin on blockchain.com. And then you can also transfer it to your Telegram wallet and play around with it. You can send it to your friends. Just play with it would be my first advice. And then the second advice for those of you who are sitting in a Western country or a developed country, put yourself in the shoes of someone who earns $5 a day and is largely living in the cash economy. None of the corner shops basically have credit card terminals. Typically, you pay in fiat cash, but you have a smartphone now, and there's suddenly an alternative to fiat cash, which is also not dollars or pounds or euros. That is Nigerian naira, right? And then think about if you haven't traveled to these countries, and you can imagine I've been to all of them many, many times, most of them at least. How life-changing that is,
yeah.
And have the empathy, to put yourself in. Everyone here in the developed world has a lot of financial privilege, And there's a great book about, Check Your Financial Privilege by Alex Gladstein. That be certainly been I can confirm his observations are unequivocally true. And I think that's what you need to fully understand the power of this.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it with that. So we've got the exec chairman here from Ton Strategy Co. The stock ticker is TONX. Go check it out. You can visit the website, get the investor updates and more, and follow us on the social channels. Thank you so much, Manny, for joining us today.
My pleasure, Nick. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
If you enjoyed today's podcast episode, please subscribe and share. And on behalf of the entire Blockchain.com team, thank you for tuning in.